Hello students, today I'm going to talk about the great modern poet G.M. Hopkins, who was born in the Victorian period. Though he was born in the Victorian period and though he composed his poems in the Victorian period, yet by the date of publication, he may be considered as a modern poet, and we have modern characteristics also in his poems. Hopkins was a poet. He was a Victorian poet by birth, but from the date of publication of his poems, he is considered a modern poet. Keep this thing in his mind. He was born in the Victorian period, he composed his poems in the Victorian period, yet by the date of the publication of his poems he may be considered as a modern poet. His technique of writing poetry has attracted many modern poets and many modern readers. We have modern strengths, modern touch in his verse. Mental conflict and other things. But as far as this poem is concerned, the poem which we are going to discuss, The Sea and the Skylark, we can, we have, Victorian some characteristics in this poem. He, mourns the loss of faith, as we saw in the early in a poem by Matthew Arnold, that he also mourned the loss of faith in his poem Dover Beach. So here the setting is the poet is at a beach, and two sounds, trench strike in his ears. At one side there is the vast ocean, at the other side there is a bird, a songbird, a skylark, which is flying, which is soaring higher and singing, pouring music. And the poet thinks that this is permanent and permanent and eternal. This music, these sounds are permanent and eternal to the poet. And at the other side, he thinks about the human civilization, human towns, human city, and he feels that we have been deteriorated. The Sea and the Skylark. This poem was written in 1877 when he was in Ryle. Ryle was a city. But he does not mention this city in this particular sonnet. So we should not think about that particular city where he wrote this poem. So we may consider it to be any modern industrialized town which is losing its beauty, its charm, sheen. The poet talks about the deterioration of modern cities, modern towns. He is not talking about a particular city like Ryle, where he was, where he had the experience of hearing the sounds coming from both sides of his ears. The poem contains the general thoughts of the poet about nature and about man, about civilization, about man-made cities, man-made towns. As far as the construction of the poem is concerned, we can say that, yeah, this is a Petrarchan sonnet with the general rhyme scheme which we have in most of the Petrarchan sonnets. The rhyme scheme, I will tell about the rhyme scheme later, or okay, let me tell it. It is A, B, B, A, B, B, A, C, D, C, D, C, D. And there is a clearly marked division between the octave and, as you know, Petrarchan sonnets are divided into two parts, octave and sestet. So, here also there is a clear-cut division between the octave and the sestet. The idea shifts at the end of the octave. And the octave and the sestet have further been divided into half. The octave is divided into two quatrains. Octave, there are 8 lines, you know, in octave and 6 lines in a sestet. But the poet has divided the octave also into 2 parts, 2 quatrains. That means 4 lines each. So the octave is divided into 4 lines, 2 quatrains. And the sestet is also divided into 3 lines, which is known as tercets, 2 tercets. One tercet contains 3 lines. So the octave is divided into 2 quatrains and the sestet is divided into 2 tercets. Hopkins uses the rhyme pattern to describe the coherence and regularity of the nature, exemplifying it by the sea and the skylark. I mean, what I want to say is that the sea and the skylark represent nature. The sea and the skylark represent natural beauty, music, melody. In the octave, Hopkins describes or compares 2 ancient, eternal, permanent sounds. In the octave, he talks about the sound coming from the sea, the ocean, from one side, from the right-hand side, and the music, the melody coming from the left-hand side from a songbird, skylark. So we have 2 sounds, one coming from the ocean and the other coming from a beautiful bird which powers music when it sings from the sky. And the poet believes that these 2 sounds are eternal sounds. The poet believes that these 2 sounds are permanent. They represent the permanence of nature. The first quatrain of the sonnet describes the sea. The sound coming, the waves striking against the shore, the sound of the waves coming from the sea. Hopkins is walking along the shore near the North Welsh town of Rhyl, R-H-Y-L, Rhyl. This is the name of the town where Hopkins is standing. The city, which was then a famous tourist resort on account of its wide sandy beaches. This was a beautiful city, and various tourists flocked to this city to pass their time, to enjoy their vacations, holidays, etc. Because there were wide sandy beaches and very beautiful scenery. Walking westwards, think that I am standing here and there is the west side, I am walking in this direction, so the ocean happens to be at the right side, right hand side, and the songbird, the skylark, is on my left side. He remarks particularly on the contrasting sounds of the high and the low tide. He talks about, in the first quatrain of the sonnet, he talks about the sound, about the waves, about the beautiful ocean striking against the shore, and he talks about the sound of the high tide, the sound of the low tide, and the beauty, the music of nature. Now, he comes to the second quatrain of the octave. The second quatrain centers on the skylark. The poet talks about a beautiful songbird, a skylark, in the second quatrain of the same sonnet. On his left hand, since on his right hand there is an ocean striking against the beaches and the shores, and on his left hand at the beach lie the vast expanse of sand dunes, over which a bird, a skylark, is flying higher and still higher, soaring, flying up, going up. The imagery seeks to convert sound into sight. This is a beautiful poem, a beautiful sonnet, and the words have chosen skillfully, intelligently to convey the sounds and the sights. As we are asked to see the bird's song as a musical score, very beautifully the poet uses metaphysical conceits. It's not a common simile, but it's a conceit where we are asked to see the bird's song as a musical score pouring out of the bird's throat, then falling like a fisherman's line, reeling out. Have you seen a fisherman's line? A line? What do you call it in Hindi? By which a fisherman catches the fish, and it unwounds itself, and the fish are caught. So the line reeling out, such a complicated image is often called conceit. I will explain you the meaning of conceit later in some other video when I will discuss metaphysical poetry. Generally, in a conceit, two dissimilar things are compared with each other. The octave is purely descriptive, giving detailed imagery of the sea and the skylark.